Hillary Clinton once said, "It takes a village." I definitely agree with that, because where I came from, it took a small town to build a strong village. This village was originally named Ice School until Charles Leavenworth, one of the first commercial developers, came to this area and started developing the land. Because of his success, the town was named after him. Soon after he prepped the land for settlement, Captain Leavenworth left for Oregon, never to be seen again. Trains were the future. It seemed like nothing could stop them. The steel monsters roared through the valley, making our life so much easier. We never thought they could be stopped, until the White Death came along.
It was the perfect storm, if you will. It was a lot of snow during that week before, and the Great Northern was running passenger service and mail service through Stevens Pass, through the tunnels, and coming out on the west side. Well, from the accounts that I've read, the snow was so bad that they finally got to the point on the west portal where the trains were sitting and waiting for the snow to clear so they can get down into Everett and Seattle. And my understanding of the incident was they actually had moved the trains out of the tunnel and they were waiting on the side of the mountain to proceed forward. And during the evening, early morning, it avalanched and actually slid down and took the passenger train as well as the mail train over the edge, killing almost 100 people. It's the nation's largest train disaster ever recorded, so it was pretty devastating. But before that, people were held up in the train for almost 5 days. They were being very frustrated because the food and water was getting kind of scarce. They actually left the train and went into the town of Wellington to their hotels to get some food, or if I remember, it was a restaurant there, it wasn't a hotel, and got food. Came back to the train, but it was after a 5 or 6 day waiting period that, and people actually were forbidden to leave the train and trek down this mountainside to the next town over, which was in a walking distance. A few men actually left the train and walked down and got to safety. But the women and children and most of the men stayed. So it was a very interesting. There's a wonderful book called The White Cascades that accounts that disaster very well.
In 1904, Lamb Davis Lumber Company built a sawmill in Leavenworth. Suddenly, lumber camps popped up everywhere. Lumber soon became the cash crop of Leavenworth. About the same time, thousands of pear and apple trees were planted along the Ice School and Wenatchee River valleys. Business was also going well, in fact. Leavenworth was called the Wild Town in the West. Bars and brothels lined Leavenworth streets, and everything was going their way. It was a booming town until one day the lumber industry decided to hang up its hat.
Railroads are railroads, and railroads through history have changed routes, modified their tracks, made it more appealing for them so that they would gain more money. And they're going to go where the money's at. When we have a simple change, what I would perceive as simple is moving a main track system off of our main street to Chumstick, which is just 90 degrees out and about 2 miles away. It's not a significant move, but it was big enough to hurt our economy.
Did you know during World War II, German prisoners of war were sent here to work in the orchards?
The reason they used the German prisoners of war for labor was because during the war, all the younger men were serving. A good percentage of them were in the military, so they used them as labor during World War II. My dad was a prisoner of war. He got captured in North Africa, and there was a prisoner of war camp right down here in the flat. You can see it from my house. And a bunch of German prisoners from North Africa ended up in Washington State, and they picked peas and they picked apples and worked in the motor pool at Fort Lewis. And after the war was over, after they shipped the prisoners of war home, it took a couple of years. They worked my dad in England for a year. And in the early 50s, George Cowan, a grower from here, went to visit his son, who was in the military in England, and came over and visited my dad, because my father, as a young guy, used to draw and paint, and always took it upon himself to learn a language, so he knew a bunch of the people, of the local farmers, and George was over there, and he ran around with my dad ran him around for 3 weeks in Germany, and George convinced him to come back to the United States. And since my dad had ulcers from the business he was in, and decided to make a change. And that's how we ended up here. I was about 1.5 years old. My sister was almost 4. So they just packed us up and shipped us over here. And we started in Peshastin, working in the orchard. My dad was an only child, so it was, he had a mother that was all he left back there. And my mother's family, they were tremendously excited. My mom wasn't at all thrilled. They actually had a return ticket for her to go home if she didn't like it, and she was ready to leave with us kids. But my dad wrecked the car on the railroad. In fact, that's on that railroad underpass on the North Road. That's where he hit that underpass and took the money for the ticket to repair the car.
Leavenworth was spiraling down, with little hope to spiral back up. People were desperate to find ways to save their town.
Called a meeting at the Osborne Elementary. I'll always remember this. Now, the meeting was facilitated by the University of Washington Bureau of Community Development. And this was a group that went out to other areas. I think they did Port Angeles too. They didn't come here and tell us what to do. They came here and told us that if we went through this process, we would come out knowing what we wanted to do. And it really worked. I mean, but we had to go through this process. That took a couple of years. But there was so much interest in making things better here. But the fascinating and the most interesting part of this life study is that over 250 people showed up to approve this life study. And the population, I believe, was 1,100. It may have been 1,200. But to have that population of 1,100 or 1,200, that counted children also. And to have 250 people show up for this meeting wanting to improve the town was amazing, was remarkable.